So nothing else outside was going to fix it. There wasn't a diet or an exercise regime or any kind of pill or potion or machine. And I watched this journey play out, right? I'm watching the mind creating all sorts of ideas of how I'm going to cope and what I'm going to do and what I'm going to say. And it was like a whole dream took place in my mind. If you don't let yourself experience grief, you will not experience the depth of a relationship. What will happen to my life? What will happen to me? What will happen to my relationships? What will happen to my sense of connection to family and my identity and belonging? Or what's going to happen to all this?
So why is it still taboo? Why isn't this being taught in schools? Why isn't this being prioritized? Hello everyone and welcome back to Wiser Together. Thank you for joining us and being a part of this. We truly appreciate your support. Today we have Chris with us. Chris has been spent in the last 15 years transforming and healing people's lives through spiritual practices, coaching, and holistic therapy. And you always come back to self-intelligence and sharing, just making people aware of what self-intelligence is, how they can use it, and how they can use that to better improve their lives. So what is tell us a little bit about yourself firstly, and tell us what self-intelligence is that you've been trying to promote this since the past 15 years.
Yeah. Well, firstly, all of this work and thank you for putting this together to share together and be in resonance with each other. I feel like we're on the same radio frequency, all, expressing music in different ways, but we're vibing. I went through my own journey 20 odd years ago now with a lot of issues of anxiety and depression and chronic health challenges and heartbreak and a few, pretty challenging things that went on in my life. And I couldn't get through it with what I'd been shown at school, for example, or my parents passed down to me. So I went on a journey of discovering how to look after myself and how to understand what's going on inside me, because externally nothing was going to fix what was going on. And that took me on an inner journey, and I went and studied holistic therapy throughout that time and became a musculoskeletal therapist and a yoga teacher and results coach. And I did a whole range of different studies. I studied for many years, and I became particularly interested in health issues and challenges that were clearly coming from something going on inside. So nothing else outside was going to fix it. There wasn't a diet or an exercise regime or any kind of pill or potion or machine or anything like that was going to sort this issue out, if that makes sense. And there's a big rabbit hole a lot of people are going down when facing these issues. And it's a challenging road to know when to come home to ourselves to find the answers. And so what I started to do is, because I did it for myself, I started to pass that on to my clients as a musculoskeletal therapist. And I also trained people in emotional anatomy and emotional release bodywork and various things. I started to pass on this knowledge, and I didn't know what it was called at the time. There was no name for it.
Right.
And I was just doing it. And the best way that people who came to me would describe it as was working with the truth. That's how they would say it. It's like, I would ask, there would be times when I was seeing psychologists and counselors that would come to me as a body worker, which was pretty strange because we weren't doing any body work at all. And I started to ask, why are you coming to me? Why are you not going to your supervisors or other psychologists or whatever? And they said, because you work with the truth and I want to work with the truth. And I didn't know what to call that, and it was a challenge there for a while, but eventually it came through a lot of stillness, and it naturally came that the intelligence that we didn't get at school or from our parents or from social media or anywhere, where it's a very rare thing to get, was self-intelligence. Intelligence about ourselves, understanding how our minds work, understanding the relationship between thoughts, beliefs, our values, the sense of fulfillment that's necessary. There's a whole inner world that's going on. right? And this is an education, and it's an experiential education. And so I've then spent a long time now educating people, because I found their results were much greater on every level, whether it was a relationship problem, chronic health issue, an addiction of any kind. It didn't matter what it is. We're working at the root cause, which is working with what's going on inside. So, yeah, that's a bit of a short, snapshot, if you like, of a
I think that also explains how you describe self-intelligence as a modern psychology. I was about to ask how was
yeah.
it different than the psychology that we know, or the established psychology. So that explains a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, established psychology often looks at you as a problem to fix, right? Or trying to diagnose the imbalance that you have. Where from the perspective of self-intelligence, you're more looking at a way to be aware of yourself and develop skills and habits, whether you think you've got a problem or not. It's valuable in any case. If you want to improve your performance or ability to deal with adversity or ability to be resilient in challenges, you want to be self-intelligent, because otherwise you're going to fall apart and you're going to fall in a heap when challenges come, when things don't go right. It's all going to be a mess. So it's not based in that diagnostic medical space, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Hmm. So what I'm hearing from this is that just having or sort of developing the ability to have a level of awareness wherein you can manage with different shapes that self can often take in different situations, and sort of get attached to that. If we're going through stress, we feel differently. If we're going through misery, we feel differently. If we're going through something, uh, we feel happiness, we deal with it differently. And different situations, the self can sort of take a different shape in life. And in some situations, people find it overwhelming, or they're not able to manage with that self identity that they create in that situation.
Yes, absolutely. I like the word you use, the shape. I use this a lot. The shape we take inside as the person that we believe ourselves to be shows up very differently depending on different circumstances. And as long as there's only the awareness that that's who I am, that shape that I take, depending on what's going on, then you're very limited to how you can deal with things and how you can better approach life, and most importantly, how you enjoy reality. Because reality doesn't serve the person inside. This is what we all come to realize.
Hmm.
Reality is not serving the person inside. So when the person inside says this shouldn't be happening, reality doesn't serve that part that says it should or shouldn't be happening, because the fact is reality is going to show up the way it shows up. So how do we deal with reality? How do we better deal with reality? This is the question, because we're either suffering reality or we're flowing with it and we're moving with it and we're embracing it and accepting it. And this is maturity, right?
Hmm. And that's amazing, because people can observe this in their own lives as well. The outside situation, the reality as we call it, is objectively the same for two people, but you can certainly see how two people react very differently to it. So that just goes to show that the root of the problem isn't in the reality, but how we perceive it and how we react to it, right?
100%. That is the observable fact, isn't it? Just exactly what you said. And we're now able to see that because we're not the person inside, we can adopt completely different ways of approaching things. It's not like I'm fixed to this way of being, right? So if someone's anxious about public speaking, for example, they don't have to stay with that. It doesn't have to be their issue forever. Or if someone has shame about their sexual abuse situation that happened when they were younger and they've been carrying the shape of that throughout their whole life, they don't have to keep that. But until
Yep.
you know what I mean? But until you understand how to not take that shape and live that out, it will be lived out. It's not even like a choice. It's just going to be a process that takes place. So this is a superpower, really, right? To be able to go, look, I understand the shape that I'm taking, and I understand how to shift. And yeah, that's what we can go into, because
I think this is a good time to introduce. I was saving this for later, but I think while we're on this is a good time to introduce this. And like Parmeet said, you have a lot of content online, and we managed to go through some of it to prepare for this podcast as well. And one thing that I really loved is one of the blogs that you have on your website with your son Dylan. That story about the biggest fear that you'll face, and about how you were walking with him, and there was a dark, empty street, and how he came about the answer of it feels like loneliness, and about how you stitched that together with one of your sessions where you had 36 people, and by the end of your 7 medicines, and the way that you conducted that entire sessions, how 30 out of 36 people, 35 said that they had the fear of being lonely. And it's what I wanted to relate with what we're trying to say right now, is that a lot of people don't even realize that these people have these fears. So this is something internal, and this is something that because of self-intelligence, I assume that you're able to bring about. So do you mind sharing a little bit about this as well? Because a lot of generation, like especially the generation that Parmeet and I belong to, and the next generation, Generation Z, also is going through this. We see a lot of suicides, we see a lot of mental and social disorder because of loneliness, but at the same time they're not aware of this. So what can we do about this? What are your thoughts on this, especially talking about the younger generation?
well, the way that I approach this awareness of what's going on inside is to, firstly, life is continually triggering us to discover it. So any situation that triggers you, right, whether someone's put their finger up at you at the window as you're driving home in traffic, or when you get home, there's clothes left on the floor again, and something's going on in the relationship, or you step on the scales and they're not the right weight that you want them to be. Any time, literally any time, that the way that reality is showing up, you have a problem with that, right? There's a problem, right? I feel triggered. And when you feel triggered, you know, because you feel that sense of tension within yourself. You don't feel comfortable. You don't feel at ease, right? This is what I utilize to get back to those fears. So I feel triggered. I feel I'm not at ease. From there, what I do is educate people about what are the perceptions that have now taken place in your mind that are saying that this is not okay. And we're looking at the shouldn't thoughts, for example, or the what if thoughts. What if thoughts. So, for example, I'll give you an example. My partner recently went to the hospital to get a minor operation, but any operation is significant, right? Yeah. And having to go under and be knocked out for a while, and there's possible dangers. And in this day, it went on for hours, right? It was supposed to be a 45-minute or something like this thing. And she went in at 10 o'clock in the morning and hasn't contacted me at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I know something's wrong, but I cannot contact her. Do you see? So what is the mind doing with that, right?
Coming up with different...
It's going into the what if thoughts, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I watch this journey play out, right? I'm watching the mind creating all sorts of ideas of how I'm going to cope and what I'm going to do and what I'm going to say. And oh my gosh, it was like a whole dream took place in my mind, but I'm aware of this, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand that my mind right now is afraid of something. It's afraid I'm going to lose something. Because there's a few chief fears. One is the fear of loneliness. Yeah. The fear that's even deeper than loneliness is the fear of loss.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so whenever you look at a trigger, you're looking at what is it about this situation where I perceive I might lose something. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yes. And often that loss is tied to loneliness as well. Right. Yep. So if I lost my partner, some tragic thing happened when the surgery was taking place, then I'm going to be lonely and I've lost that person. So that's now
Correct.
happening. Yeah. And what's interesting is, you may have noticed this for yourself, and it's really bizarre to do this, is that if you get on the phone with that person, you may be cranky with them. For example, you may be like, what's going on? And all of a sudden you're angry with them because they made you feel, that's the idea. They made me feel so upset and all day. And I was, this type of thing, this can be a reaction, right, to that fear of loss. And also what comes out of that is the victim perpetrator rescuer cycle. Okay. So when you fear that you're going to lose something, you're the victim of the loss. Does that make sense? So whenever you possibly, it doesn't matter if you haven't lost it or not. If the fact is, if you perceive the loss, you are a victim. And if you are a victim, you're in the victim perpetrator rescuer cycle, and the victim becomes a perpetrator very quickly. Okay, so I could be then watching my mind in judgments about the medical system and why they screw up all the time, and they've made me feel all these feelings all day, and now it's their problem, right? Now I'm in blame town on them now, but I'm aware of this, right? And then guess what? I'm pissed off and I'm agitated, and I go driving on the road, and then someone does something, and now I'm going to take it out on them, and now this internal thing is now going externally, right? Yeah. But when you track it all back, every time it's fear of loss. But that fear of loss will come through the fear of, say, failure, right? Who can you recognize the fear of failure? Anytime you go to do something, it comes up going, don't commit because you might fail. Fear of abandonment, fear of wasting time. How often are we afraid of wasting time?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Fear of loss. I've got a whole massive table of these fears, but you break them all down, it comes back to that. It comes back to this loss concern. So this is a major discovery of refinement to see this. Yeah. And right. So where are you not afraid of loss is the important next question. Because if you don't know where you're not afraid of loss, you have to react to the possibility of loss with some kind of behavior or compensation or something to mitigate that loss. And then what that becomes, we're a slave to the mind. That's how we become a slave to the mind. And the mind is then overactive in its pursuit to mitigate loss wherever it possibly can. So when people say, my mind is so busy all the time, it's just so busy. It's like, if you look at what it's busy about, if you really are honest and understand how to track back to what it's busy about, it's try to mitigate loss.
It is, yeah. I think I have a very relevant example. I was indeed traveling right now, right? So it's a very trivial one, a very I'm not even sure if it means anything, but
I love trivial ones. I love them.
Yeah, because you see, like, the thing that I love about self-intelligence and about the content that you write, it's quite practical. It's I really do think people resonate with things which are easier to understand, and when you explain it like a 5-year-old would also understand. So here I was traveling in Thailand with my friends, and of course you have a week or two, and then you're having a great time, etc., etc. I live in a different country, they live in a different country. So when the time comes to say goodbye, there is that feeling which sort of makes you blue. That there is that feeling which sort of like, you don't know what it is, because I mean, no one's dying. You will probably see them, but it's sort of that feeling that you don't know when you'll see them. And I think all of us were feeling that. And I did indeed talk to myself. I took a walk, and I realized myself, like, that feeling was a feeling of loss, like me losing that time with my friends, or the ability to spend more time with my friends. It's the same feeling that I had with Parmeet, because Parmeet is also in another country, right? And we try to meet at least once a year, for a week or two, if he's around in town, or if I could go to him. And then when the time comes to say goodbye, it's the same thing, because you're losing that person, or the ability to spend time physically with them. So I do get that. And when you said it, I was just replaying these things in my head.
Yes, and there's also the natural grief when things come to an end, right? There's a natural grief that will come, like when friends go away, or you're splitting off in different directions. But there's also a fear of experiencing that emotion as well, and that can then restrict the amount of love and reciprocity you can experience between people, because I don't want to feel that grief, right? Yes, this is a
So in this case, for a person like me, what would you suggest? Like, if I were to say in terms of your seven medicine and going right to the bottom in terms of action, what would you prescribe me?
in the case with you in your example.
Yeah, in my example, yeah.
In your example, I wouldn't class that as a trigger. I would class that as a natural grief that comes up, and what I would suggest is to acclimatize yourself to being with that feeling. Don't distract from it. Don't start getting on your phone and get away from it, or do something else, or busy your mind, or whatever the case is. Learn to feel emotions you're afraid of or don't feel comfortable. Because the more you see emotions that come in, the also you see how they go. And they go on their own of their own accord. So that means the process has fully happened now. It's happened fully. Whereas when we keep distracting ourselves from the feelings that we have, it's like they sit there dormant, waiting to come out later. They haven't been processed. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yes. So you could be wherever you are and take 10 minutes just to be with those feelings and sit with them and observe them fully. It doesn't take long.
Hmm.
And you will discover, as the observer, you are very peaceful whilst there's grief there as well.
Correct.
They both are happening together. And that makes you feel very stable inside. Whereas if you only have the grief, you don't feel so stable. It feels like something's a bit wrong and you need to do something to
Yeah,
fix it. Does that make sense?
it makes sense. It makes sense. Let me try that.
But you're
Yes.
also like learning to accept whatever emotion it is and learning to accept and deal with it and face it as it is rather than uh, trying to get distracted or push it away
Yeah.
and wait for that thing to erupt at a different time with higher intensity,
Well, if
right?
you don't let yourself experience grief, you will not experience the depth of a relationship,
Mm,
because you're always afraid of the grief. So you keep people at some level of distance so it doesn't hit you as hard. Does that make sense?
yep.
So this is why
It
we get
does.
superficial relationships, because it's like, I'm too afraid of those feelings. They're too uncomfortable. I don't understand them very well. I don't like it. It's just that, right? So I keep people at a certain length to make sure I don't feel those things. And then we feel something's missing in terms in the enrichment of relationships, which will come out as all sorts of problems in intimacy and all sorts of, goes down that
Correct.
sort of track.
Yeah.
I believe it's a
So
common theme now in this day and age. It has become a common theme.
Yes,
I
yes.
guess we've never been taught, right? This is like we mentioned before, this isn't something that is taught in schools. And I want to
No.
come back to something you had posted on your website as well that really resonated with me as well, which was uh, the topic of self is still taboo. It's not taught in schools. Most people don't even know about it. They don't have that level of awareness. We have roughly nine peoples. We lose nine lives to suicide every day here in Australia. And I'm not trying to neglect all the other problems people might have financially or other problems in their environment, but fundamentally what it comes down to is your relationship with yourself, right? What is the chatter that you're having within yourselves? Because I'm certainly sure there are people who couldn't have their situation worse, and then two people can deal with that situation very differently. So there are people we lose to suicide here in Australia, and fundamentally it comes down to your relationship with yourself. How do you perceive yourself, and what is the voice, the chatter going on within? So why is it still taboo? Why isn't this being taught in schools? Why isn't this being prioritized? Where we see like the impact of it is so magnificent in our lives.
It's a very core question, and there are many different ways to answer this. The principle way with the theme that we're speaking to today is that it brings up a lot of fear to look at it, because the person inside that we're believing ourselves to be is a belief. It's not a reality. It's not stable. It's not grounded. So to look at it is scary. Like, what will happen to my life? What will happen to me? What will happen to my relationships? What will happen to my sense of connection to family and my identity and belonging? Or what's going to happen to all this if I start looking at myself?
Is it like a threat, sort of like threatening, sort of like a threat to your identity of yourself or what you perceive yourself to be?
Absolutely. So we're conditioned by society, by our parents, into a narrative. Okay. And as soon as you start asking the questions about yourself, you're going beyond the narrative. You're going off, I like to call it, you're going off script.
Script, curriculum, yeah.
Yeah, you're going off the script, you see? Again, that could be a very lonely place. There's fears about that. Okay. So it's, as we're younger, when we're young people, we really look to our parents and people for that guidance and the way to live. Okay. But then what happens is, for some people, it doesn't work for them. It's so out of alignment. It's not in resonance. And then they have to start questioning back to themselves to find their true alignment. Yes. That this is not brought up in school because our societies are still living in the sleep of narratives. The whole world is still stuck in the sleep state of living in a narrative. And the media even says this directly. All right. So they will say, this is the narrative we're choosing. Like, for example, if people are buying cryptocurrencies or something like that, they say, what narrative are you buying? What is that saying? A narrative says it's made up. It's made up. Right. So as soon as you start questioning yourself, you realize the whole of society is made up. It's made up. It seems scary to realize it's make believe. It's just made up. I don't want to find out that it's made up. I want to know that it's real out there.
Someone a long time just came up with something, and then the whole society ended up following it.
Exactly. It's made up. Yes. And what that does is it puts responsibility on you to be the true self that you are. And there's very few people that are prepared for that really, really want that. It's like we want it in theory maybe or in concept, but when it comes to the reality, it's like, I don't want that responsibility, essentially. So why is it taboo? Because very few people want to be responsible to go off script. It's like the cow who jumped over the fence and just live your life. It's like, no, I don't, I feel too exposed. I don't know what to do with myself. You know what I mean? And so we tend to follow the herd, if you like.
Correct. And adding to what you said, it's the teachers as well, right? So this is one of the problems that I also face, and I also used to ask, is that the teacher that used to taught us, right? Apart from just the curriculum, okay, if it's a math teacher, that's it. Like they used to come in, teach us math. I do get it that that's their job, but I feel like a teacher's job, especially at a primary school or a secondary school, it's also to shape us as well towards the society, because we also look towards them. Teachers are often called as second parents, and in sociology, we're also taught like that's a second institution where we're basically being taught how to function in a normal society. And I saw this a lot in teachers as well. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of anger as well. Some days they were okay.
I feel like they're going through the same thing. I mean, they're not different, right?
And they're like quite older than us. They're quite older than us, and they
It's
never
not
really.
an age thing, perhaps.
I mean, why I said that is because, like, how the more time you spend on this earth, the more time you might try in figuring out yourself as well, or indulge in self-intelligence. But it's what, like Chris said as well, like it was never done, and the media and the conditioning and everything never really gave them an opportunity. So I do agree with your point, Pramit, as well. Like, it's quite taboo, and I do think it's quite necessary now more than ever, especially with what is going on.
Well, look at the question, right? If I ask someone, and I've asked many people this, okay, I say, who are you? who are you? And if I ask you this directly, it's already uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I live my life as if I know who I am. Anybody listening right now, think about your life. You live your life as if you know who you are and what you're doing. But then when you're asked the question directly, it's like, I I don't know actually. Like, because if you say something like, "Oh, my name, I know who I am. I'm Chris." You go, "All right. Well, what happens when you change your name to Adam or whatever it is?"
Still, yeah.
Okay, so the name can change, but you're still there. Okay, or okay, on my roles, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm these things, or they all change too. They come and go. So I
Yeah.
stay. The roles come and go. On my values, yeah. Okay, I did a values task 1 month ago. Okay, now at 6 months or something, I do another values task, and they're all different. Oh shit, my values are different. Okay, so I'm not my values. Oh, are my beliefs. Are you your beliefs? Have they changed? Right? Once upon a time, you believed in Santa Claus, and now you don't. Right? So it's like, wait, how is it possible that I could live this whole life and not even know who I am? It's taboo by the fact that it's such a slap in the face to
Correct.
every human being who lives with the arrogance. I know who I am. And then asked, you don't know who you are. And it's like, are we humble enough as human beings yet to admit that? Pretty rare, right? We all want to feel like we have a good sense of ourselves. We know who we are and these things. But you know
Yeah.
what I found? I found that people almost need to be broken to drop the arrogance to listen
Mm.
and learn about themselves. It's not
Absolutely.
needed as a thing, but it seems to be the way humans are, is we're so stubborn with our ideas and beliefs and perceptions. Life sometimes has to break us in half, put us through some dark night of the soul of some kind to go, you know what, I don't even know anything. I don't know who I am. It's like now we're closer to the truth. Now we're
Correct.
getting somewhere, right?
Correct.
Yes.
I mean,
But it's
if
a
you,
problem because, in just a sec. So in society, there's a problem. Society rewards you having this extremely limited identity, you knowing who you are, which is the more limited your identity is, the further away you are from the truth, right? Because then you have all these boundaries around you, right? You're further away from the truth, and society sort of,
yeah,
uh,
because then we're resonating with them. Then we're just adding just fuel to a fire that's already there, and it just helps.
yeah, this is the problem then, because like we don't we don't reward someone coming up and actually like
Yeah, it's like what he
letting
said,
go of these.
because that's why it makes the, if you do that, then it make the other person uncomfortable as well, because then it's like, yeah, you're asking that question and then you really don't know how to answer. So it's better
Yeah.
to just keep it hush hush and not
That's
go
the
go.
taboo. That's the
Yeah,
taboo.
that's the
We
taboo.
all
Yeah.
we all agree. We all agree to keep it hush hush, right?
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
agree, right? Like
Yeah.
for example, everybody's carrying some form of shame,
Yes.
Yep.
and everybody's pretending that it's not happening.
Correct. Absolutely.
We will hold certain secrets so deep in ourselves and compensate for that and live lives that evolve around trying to keep that hidden inside. And everybody's doing, I've done so much shame work, because if you're not the witness, you become what you're not the witness of. And shame will then drive everything. And it's a vibration that is in the fear state, which causes so much havoc on our planet. And we all walk around pretending as though this is not happening, right? Because it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel safe to expose these things unless someone maybe goes to therapy or some kind of thing like this. They feel like they can do that, but with friends and family and so on,
Yeah.
it's still like that would be too much to handle. Oh God, I don't know how to cope with all of this. It's
Exactly.
a
I feel like no matter, still, like, yeah, people are, things are changing. People are understanding this. People are trying to discover more about the self, be it
yes.
through their own practices or seeing a therapist or seeing someone. But I feel like as soon as you pop out of that practice and go into the real world, you're back to ground zero, and that ground zero is always going to influence you in that way. And so, in my opinion, like, either the world needs to change or we need to have this practice so regularly that when we go in the ground zero and we have so many things that trigger those things, we have the level of awareness where we can come back of it to it.
Well, it is very simple. I want to make this simple because it is simple. It's the difference between living from a state of fear and not living from a state of fear.
Yes. Yes.
And it is extremely practical. So whether you're dealing with the things that you're doing at work or being a parent or looking after your house and home, from to exercise to every part of your life on the most practical, mundane, everyday levels, is the fear there as a part of it, the psychological, egoic needs, is that in there or is it free of that? And the discernment can be tricky when the self-intelligence hasn't been developed. Okay, so that's essentially the outcome. Is we're living in a society that's less driven by psychological fear that stems and originates in the ego self, and that's all it is. It's not like, it's so basic in that sense, and I think that's hard for the spiritual ego to take because people love the gurus and the enlightenment concepts and all of these things, and it's difficult also for others who are so entrenched in their egos to go far out. I'm finding it hard to admit that I've been living my life from so much fear. I didn't even realize that was happening, and I feel ashamed of it. And it's confronting to discover what you're saying. And it's like, well, is it worth discovering it and dealing with it or pretending it's not happening? Because the results in your life, the quality of your relationships, the symptoms in your body, everything is trying to tell you what's going on. The universe is doing its best effort to wake you up to it if you're prepared to look and if you know how to look. Yeah.
I want to add another element to this, and that was the element of power, because I'm a big proponent of attaining power through self agency. That was the number one factor for me, for shedding fear, because when I took control of myself, and of course, like you said, we're all singing the same song but through different instruments.
Yes.
For me, it was just taking self control and self agency and letting go of all of my fears, uh, from the different aspects of it. And I read on your website as well. I'm not able to quote it exactly, but I think you mentioned it somewhere as well, that through self intelligence, you also either it is quite powerful or that you attain power. So, can you explain through that lens as well?
So when you mention self-agency and the power part, I think I need a bit more clarity to answer your question.
All right. So when I am talking about self agency, I am trying to, or if I put it in my own perspective, what I'm trying to say is that I am focusing on myself and the action that I am responsible for, or the action that I produce, and not necessarily put it on someone else. Or it's like what Parmeet said as well, that through someone's action garner a reaction, right? I like to internalize everything. So whatever and wherever I am in my own life, I am because of my own actions. And once I realize that, once I give myself that power, I also give myself that power or that reality that whatever the future holds will also be depending on me and my own actions.
Okay, yes. Okay. At the action consequence side of things is relative. So there's a truth to that. For me, it's not the ultimate. So because the ultimate will not always align with your ideas about what your actions would produce,
Okay.
right? So you can take all the right actions and reality may produce things that aren't making sense to you, right? And then you're going, well, how is this happening to me? I've done all the right things. This happens to the good person. There's a syndrome I see that plagues many people, is the good person syndrome. And the good person perceives themselves to be taking all the right actions. And yet then somehow they still become a victim to life and life circumstances, with whatever happens, right?
It's the nice guy finishes last.
Not so much. I hear that, but not so much that. It's this idea that if I take the right actions, the right things will happen to me, and that is not true. Yep. So a lot of people are actually getting overwhelmed, decision fatigue, and all sorts of things, trying to do the right thing, realizing they're an empowered person and they can take actions because it's true. It's just, it's got its own limitation with the perceptions of what will follow from that. So the primary aspect of coming out of suffering, the mind, is to be and to continually realize you're its witness. And with that, your actions now are free of fear, but you're also free of the expectation of what those actions are going to produce as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. So when that's combined, you're able to be free of the resentment and the fatigue that comes with trying to enforce your actions to produce results that you would prefer. Because sometimes they do that, So if you go to the gym and you take the action and you lose some weight and you build some muscle, it's like, that's my action and that's my return, right? But let's say you go into the gym and then you injure yourself and you're off for 3 months and now you're pissed off because you cannot take the action. And now all of a sudden you're suffering the fact that your action's limited by that. At the end of the day, what are we looking at here? We're looking at, can you handle and flow and flourish and thrive with whatever reality throws at you? Can you be with the positive and negative emotions that are natural to arise when life shows up in certain ways? Because it's not about being happy with everything that happens, because that's just crazy.
Utopia.
It's not about that. And so that's something I would sort of feel to speak to with that, because there is the whole, we're in the coaching age, aren't we? We're in the coaching age. You can take action and do the thing, and it's so good because we can empower ourselves with knowledge and do all these different things that we weren't shown. It's a great thing, but it's also in itself limited when it comes to suffering and not. Yeah.
Is it fundamentally at the core, maybe on a subconscious level, an attachment problem, or attachment to this belief or that value or this opinion of ourselves? And obviously having those attachments and the perception of those attachments puts us in a certain shape, which limits our identity, and something happening which is not suitable for that identity that we've perceived ourselves to be, then it's a problem. And certainly life is going to throw us in deep ends in certain situations where that identity is challenged. So having that fluidity and detachment, sort of level of detachment, wherein you're just present and aware and observant, you're not this or that,
but also just as engaged. It's really interesting, to see this. I taught my son a lot around this. He wanted to be a pro gamer there for a while, and he would get very angry when he'd lose. We had a very competitive spirit, right? And it took a while I showed him, and I did some of this self-intelligence work through his gaming, right? It was perfect. And what he learned was he could strive to win without suffering losses. He thought he had to keep the anger of losing to try to win, but he realized he would want to win just as much without having to suffer the losing side. But the belief it's a belief we're conditioned with. If I am not fearing that loss, I won't succeed, and it's not true. It's not true.
This is very common in a lot of competitive people, by the way.
Yeah, right? I was about to say that, and it's what basically it's what we're taught in documentaries or interviews and everything with all of these pro athletes.
Talk about Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, like all of these guys.
Yes, so they're all going through the fear of loss, because games are all about losing and winning, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't see the losers cheering at the end. They're like humped over crying, right? And the other people are ecstatic and so on. And that's natural too. There's no problem. Of course, you're gonna feel down when you've lost, and you're gonna feel up when you've won. That's all natural. Who suffers it though? Who suffers that? Because it's shown even under MRI and with people who are very self-intelligent that and have do meditation, they experience the emotion very acutely and it drops very fast. Whereas people who are stuck in their ego identities, right, where their identity was based on that win, they experience the emotion less but longer and chronic over longer periods of time. And it's like you're not able to, like a baby experiences emotions very quickly. We lose that capacity to experience.
And it breaks them. A lot of people don't even recover. Like sometimes the suffering becomes so much, they take it upon them so much that they never recover. They're not the same person.
They
Yes,
never stop living in that thought. Never step out of it.
it's a disease, and a lot of sporting people are revealing this now and showing the world how anxious and screwed up their lives were behind the scenes while in the forefront. It is amazing. Actors are bringing this up. Very successful people are saying, you know what, on the outside, yes, this is going on, but on the inside, I've been on the brink of a mental breakdown
Yep.
because of these things that haven't been dealt with. We are very, very amazing at making the external look a certain way that doesn't reflect the internal. We're very, very good at this. And it's time to go, you know what, is life worth getting to your deathbed with the idea of what your life looked like while feeling like you're caving inside? Why aren't we using life to find inner strength? Because that's what it's trying to do. But why? Because we just weren't conditioned to do that. We weren't taught to do that. We
Yeah.
were conditioned to exceed this other way. It's just what it is.
And that's why you have a lot of high profile suicides as well.
Yes. Yes.
It's crazy. Chris, I want to ask you, what do you think of the law of attraction?
I don't think, I think there's quite an immature stance a lot of the time on the law of attraction, and it's a very personal stance, right? It's like life's going to give me this thing, and I'm going to
Yeah.
attract it and do
And
processes
it's
to attract the thing
often than
that's
not,
going to.
it's just something glorified as well through popular culture and social media.
Okay, so let's say this. From my perspective, you're a vibrational being, and anything that's in you that is causing resistance and illusion and fear and these things is obscuring your vibration, okay, your natural essence. And whatever that vibration is, the world will reflect that vibration to you. That's how you perceive reality, and you'll create and orchestrate reality to match that vibration. That's why
Correct.
we have in relationships and work, like everything. If you look after your vibration, which is to come home to yourself, the external world will reflect the accuracy of your vibration, which is the law of attraction, if you like.
Yeah.
So I'm attracting good things in my life, not because I'm going, those things out there are going to make me happy, I'm going to draw them into me. The opposite. I'm going to do the work internally to drop all the vibrational frequencies that are causing denseness, heaviness, and so on, which keep getting reflected externally, which you could say I'm attracting them. You see how it's this way around?
Yeah.
So that what happens with that is life just shows up as the reflection of your internal state, and then the synchronicities and all the things that you've heard about, like with attraction, and that will naturally take place. But it doesn't have the expectation. It doesn't have the hidden agenda. A lot of the time, people doing law of attraction work, they have this hidden agenda that this thing is going to make me
Expectation.
happy, right? Yeah, this expectation is like, that's what the world's going to reflect back to you. It's going to reflect that expectation. You cannot lie to reality. You cannot lie to the universe. And you may be completely unaware of it. It's very innocent. All of this is innocent to me. It's a very innocent thing. It's unconscious until it becomes conscious. So that's what I would say about the law
Yeah,
of
the
attraction.
expectation part is what most people get sort of wrong, and I was sort of on those crossroads as well.
Yeah.
And it all sounds so good in theory and paper. You think something and you manifest it, and you believe in it, and you don't look left, right, center, nowhere. You're just locked into that thing. And what if it doesn't happen? But because that sort of distorts your belief in it. But wherein the expectation shouldn't have had been there in the first place in what is going to do for you, but the expectation should have been where like how you're attracting that or how you're manifesting those
Well, the other thing
thoughts.
is people have used those processes because there's a relative truth to how they work. But does it amount to happiness or peace in the face of reality? Not necessarily. Can you attract things through visualization techniques or create things? Of course you can. People have shown to do this. This is definitely something that happens. But we've got to talk a much more important, simpler thing. Is this amounting to peace? Is your world orientated, committed, devoted to peace? Or is it devoted to the idea of happiness that you would achieve from something happening? This is the question, and it takes maturity to get there. And sometimes people have to experience big success to get to that point where they realize, there isn't anything here. It was fun, or there's things about it that are great, but what I was trying to get is not here.
Yeah, there's just no timeline to this. I mean, you can attract and that big success or that big break, you never know when it could come. And like you said, even when you get to the pinnacle, you'll be like, no, this is not what I was looking for.
You're just going to the toilet, you're cleaning the kitchen, you're doing normal things. Nothing stays with you. It just isn't. This is what we're slaves to a momentary experience a lot of the time, and for the lack of a better idea, right? And so this is mind. All of this is mind. It's going to create something to go for. The mind is the carrot itself. Yeah, and we can manipulate each other and ourselves to believe in these ideas. Yes.
I've got a saying for that, which goes, my happiness isn't a result of my ambitions. My ambitions are a result of my happiness.
Oh,
How,
nice. Yeah.
how do you, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes. The origin.
yeah,
You flipped it. You flipped it where the origin is true.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And there's no expectation in that sense, where you're happy and you're uh, at peace and fully present with yourself. Whatever action that manifests from that place is going to be the truth.
Yeah.
And if the truth for that is a certain ambition for you, it's going to guide you there.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
That's
yes. Yes. Well, it's beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. These things sometimes you thinking deep, they keep coming up. I've got a bunch of them, but
Yeah.
I've got a last question. I'm gonna let Anas go. If he has something to ask you, then I have a last question that
No,
I want to ask you.
I think I asked Chris all I had. So thank you so much for your answers.
Oh, appreciate it.
Okay. One thing. Okay, so help me understand this, right? I believe, from my experience, every action has an opposite and equal reaction, and we've seen this in science as well. So let's put this in the topic of happiness and sadness, or happiness and misery. If we're looking at that chart, and if any direction towards happiness would then create room for misery as well at some point. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So the graph is inversely, directly proportional, but inversely.
Yeah.
So the more happiness, as they say as well, the higher you go, the lower you go as well. So the more happiness or those feelings that you're experiencing, simultaneously you're creating equal amounts of room on the opposite side for you to experience that at some part of in your life.
Yes.
And that being said, if our level of happiness is only quantifiable by our perception of it, regardless of if you're a billionaire or if you're a poor kid in Australia, and based on that graph, if a billionaire is sort of buying a jet, would amount to the same percentage of happiness as it would for a kid in Africa who's getting 2 meals a day.
Are you asked? What's the question? Is it the same?
Yeah, in that sense, because based on their graph of happiness, right? as much of this experience. For a billionaire, maybe buying a jet isn't as
Yeah, like it's relative to their experience.
it's relative to their experience, right? And it's same for a kid in Africa. Maybe they eat once a day, and this on this good day they get 2 meals a day,
Yeah.
right? So in their experience and relative to them, the level of happiness that they feel might be similar in that sense.
Yeah, of course. From a relative sense, that's true. So there's sort of two things you're talking about, because you're talking about the inverse nature of happiness and misery, which
The
is
duality of life,
yeah, which is
basically.
as happy as you can be, is also as sad as you can be.
Yep.
And then you're also talking about the relative nature of people's different experience with that process. So happiness or peace from the perspective of self-intelligence or inner work is to discover that which does not have the duality.
Ah, how does one do that?
When you as you discover yourself, which is not in the perceptual realm of the mind, which is that which is observing your mind, when you are with that which is observing your mind, you're already there. You are that happiness or that peace. It is already the case. It doesn't come with a condition. So it cannot ever be lost.
That makes sense.
Whereas the thing that you're talking about on the scale of happiness, it can be lost, right? So I can be this happy, then the thing is taken from me, and then I'm now this miserable.
It starts diminishing.
Yes.
Interesting. So I feel like, okay, so the solution would be to have that level of self-intelligence and always living from that sort of
Yeah,
standpoint.
because then you witness yourself experiencing the high, and you witness yourself experiencing the low, and you are stable.
You're stable throughout because
You're stable,
yes. You're that. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Whereas and so life comes to test if that's true. Because we can all say that,
Yeah.
and then life will come and go, are you really that stable? Let's see.
Yeah. And life does test you.
Oh, it is one big test. One big test.
Life is a test.
One big school. I call it life school, right? And so I noticed for myself, I'll be equanimous. I'll be observing. I'll be in a natural flow with certain things, and other things will knock me off, like I'm derailed or unstable. And it's like, what does it mean? I understand that it means my sense of happiness is derived in something beyond myself. So I've invested in a delusion. That's what's happened. It's totally fine. It's not a problem. It's not that it shouldn't be happening. It's part of growth. It's part of learning, right? And life will ensure that you come across those things. It will bring them up. It will make sure. And then we get an opportunity to find the deeper truth.
Yeah. So essentially, from what I've gathered, is that that all the answers to these problems that we perceive or have are to be solved by having that intelligence awareness, or in the present moment, right? Being that, having that self-intelligence and self-awareness and being present. And in that present moment, there isn't. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, because as soon as you are aware of the internal working, you have become the present that you already are. Presence is always. There's not a time that you're not present. People try to be present as another action. Presence is not an action. Presence is the fact, and then there's the dream that's happening.
It's awareness, right? I call it awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So awareness is happening. It's always the case, and then we lose sight of that and get identified with everything else. Yes. So the discipline is to continually remember or recognize I'm that which is the witness, and it is as obvious. It's the most obvious thing that there is.
That's the hardest thing to do as well. Like how can you? Oh,
But that's what the world is training you for, because the only reason we forget is because we think it's worth forgetting. It's like, no, it's worth going with this thing. Okay, it's no different to an addiction. If you're addicted to something, you're always doing it. If you come off the addiction, you're not doing it anymore, right? Because you're no longer believing in what the addiction is promising it's going to give you anymore. It's no different. It's no different.
But isn't that the nature of the mind as well then, though, to wander into thoughts? And obviously once you wander into thoughts, you're bound to identify with them and take that shape and then come out of it, and it's
Yes, and the more it will do that, but the more that you are not invested, particularly in fearful ego-based thoughts or ego-based ideas of fulfillment and so on, those thoughts become very light. It's almost like they don't have the seduction. They don't have that like possessive pull on you in the same way.
to get you to react in a certain way.
To get you to go down that track. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a lifelong process, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's as long as it depends on the different person. Everyone's so different in the way that they overcome addiction. No different to mind addiction. It all depends on how committed you are, and also how much you understand what's happening, because the understanding is very low, even among spiritual people. I've worked with all sorts of spiritual people, and I still find that the true fundamental understanding is still pretty low. Does that make sense? That the creative mind, the creativity gets in there so quickly, it gets all of a sudden becomes like another belief system. You'll know it's immature because it'll become a belief. Everything I'm speaking of is not belief based. Awareness is not a belief. You don't have to believe that there's awareness.
Yep.
True or not?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but notice whenever you have to believe something, now you know you've stepped out of the fundamental, you've stepped out of reality. Does that make sense? Because beliefs change, they're in the changing realm. Beliefs are fine. There's no issue with beliefs. Beliefs are powerful. They get people.
As long as they serve you.
Exactly. But who self-intelligence teaches you whenever you have a should thought or a shouldn't thought, that's a belief.
Yep.
We think beliefs are just like religion or something like this. It's like, oh, that's a belief. It's like, no, everything that you're perceiving is encased in beliefs.
Belief, yeah.
Are you aware of them?
Yeah. It's not that you shouldn't have them. It's just about being aware of them and just knowing that what belief is serving what purpose in my life.
Yes.
But because obviously you need to have certain beliefs to drive certain kinds of actions in life, to do certain things in life, right? And
yeah, I mean, it doesn't. All the change is it doesn't take primary position.
yeah,
It doesn't
just
take
hold
primary
it
position.
lightly, right? Hold it lightly, and
Well, look what happens in the world when people hold too tightly to beliefs. Look what happens. We get wars. We get major conflict. We get.
That's very interesting.
We can't understand each other, like, because we're too fixated in the meaning that we've given things. Realize a belief is the meaning you've given something. Anything you give meaning to, is a belief.
It's a belief, yeah. Relationships as well.
They say the more limited your identity is, and that paired with intelligence is disaster.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean? And Hitler is a prime example of that, right? He was an intelligent person for sure, but also he had very limited beliefs in the sense that who he is, what he believes in, and the more limited your beliefs are, you're trying to then protect that belief. And in his case, might have been Germany or whatever. And look what he did to kind of protect that limited identity of himself. Sadhguru talks about this a lot, but
yes, beautiful,
interesting. Yeah. Last thing, if there was one message you would give to the world, what would that be?
My message would be: discover the underlying resistance and fear that is behind any possible action in your life, anything that you do, anything that you're thinking. Learn to discover that and learn how to release.
And is there any simple way that people could perhaps do that? Any practice or?
Yeah, I have practices for this that are very straightforward. the message is for that to become a habit, because it's a habit. It's no different to the gym or brushing your teeth or any other habit or skill. You first have to learn how to do it by someone who teaches you how to do the thing, and then once you've learnt it, you make it a habit. And the habit, if the whole world, if every individual can come out of fear states, because it's not thought of as like fear. It's not like, I think if you were to do like if you would go down the street and go, do you live in fear? Do you live in fear? Do you live in fear? Most people go, I don't live in fear. I don't live in fear. I don't live in fear. No. Yeah, exactly. It's not, fear itself is not conscious. Unless someone's like seen a snake and they're freaked out or something, they're like, oh, that's fear. It's like, no, that's not fear. Yes, it's fear. What I'm talking about, the resistance inside that comes up as triggering situations wherever you notice yourself at odds with reality. Learn to discover the fear that's there, and then learn who you are beyond it. And the whole world changes to reflect what you've discovered. And this I think is our one business on the planet. Our one business, everybody's business. We're also in so much business, and it's like all that business is creating more of the challenges we're dealing with. The most important business of your life is to live in the vibration of your true heart that's beyond fear. That's it. Let the rest naturally unfold as it does. And it takes a lot of trust and a lot of courage, and oftentimes suffering or major success to admit that's the primary purpose.
And where can people find you, Chris? Can you tell everyone who's listening?
Yeah, so I have at the moment a free wake up experience, which spells the whole of self-intelligence out, but experientially I take you through and you discover, not as a concept of what we've done here, but actually who you are beyond the roles and the names and the achievements and all that. Is like, who are you? You can answer that as an experience, because it's just lip service to answer that as a concept. A lot of people can do that and understand the path forward, which is everything I just mentioned, then the how to, right? Because it transforms your health, major your relationships. The most work I do in people's lives is in the drama that they experience in their relationships, intimate relationships. This is where you cannot hide. It's like it just uproots it and shows what's really going on. So yeah, it's the first step to see if my particular flavor of this is like going to resonate. And from there's a community and a course and all of that to navigate down through. So the wake up experience, you'll probably have the link to that in this episode.
Yeah, we'll add it. Yeah.
It's a free opportunity, and search selfintelligence.com and you'll find me straight away. So,
and I can vouch for it as well. I did the self-intelligence experience. It's good that you call it an experience, because it is quite, concept is harder to experience, as I say. So, and it was amazing, like just sitting in that. It is a little bit scary, won't lie, but you gotta again,
why this subject is taboo, remember?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll add it in the link if anybody wants to experience it. But yeah, thank you so much, Chris, for taking out your time.
This was amazing.
And blessing us with your wisdom.
And I have so much appreciation, my deepest appreciation for people like yourself, because you put so much time and energy and trust and courage into offering this type of platform and information to others. So yeah, big appreciation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris.
Likewise. And I also want to thank everybody who's been a part of this and watched this till the end. Thank you for supporting us. And we will see you next Sunday.
Ciao, guys.